Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the Rhody Rumble podcast. Today, I'm joined by Scott Leech. Scott is the head strength and conditioning coach at the University of Rhode Island. How you doing today, Scott?
Doing pretty good. Good morning. Mondays are always a good day. Get back to work.
Great. Do you want to briefly just open up talking about your role as the head strength and conditioning coach at URI? I have a couple questions prepared for you again about, your role, your job. But just give a brief description of, what goes into being the head coach, head strength and conditioning coach at URI.
Yeah. So for context, I became the head coach, head strength and conditioning coach this past summer here at URI. So taking over from being just the assistant to now the head strength coach, a little bit different in terms of responsibility. What I tell people, my main priorities are football, women's tennis, and women's track and field here. So anything related to strength conditioning is something that I'm in charge of. So that goes to putting the workouts together, scheduling when they're going to come in and work out. Before practice, after practice, we're going to do any warm up or stretching routines. If anyone's injured and they can't practice for some reason, then we'll do some things at practice to keep them on the rehab train, get them going in the right direction, get them back to returning to play. So it's more than just, hey, you're going to come in and lift weights for, 45 minutes to an hour and then you're out the door. Anything in that umbrella is kind of within my realm. And then as the head strength and conditioning coach here, it's also my job to make sure that we get all of our teams covered. So that meant hiring a couple new staff members this past summer as well. The entire scheduling of our weight room, we have a beautiful facility here, 14 racks, plenty of turf space. So all of our teams, every single one comes in and trains multiple days a week, minimum probably 2, but we have some teams that try and come in here every single day. So part of the scheduling and making sure that everyone can get their own time to get their workout in without any, without too many people in here. You hate when the gym is too crowded, right? You don't want that to happen. So
Absolutely.
playing and training and some nutrition stuff as well. We work with our sports nutritionist here. She does a lot of the information and getting some of the nutrition stuff. We're just kind of the place where people come to pick it up and make sure, because obviously after a workout is a great time to get some of that nutrition in. So those are all little pieces to my job. It's more now being the head strength coach. It's less working in the system and it's working on the system to make it the best experience we can for our student athletes. So.
For sure. And I know you played football at Springfield College. You were a team captain there. But ultimately, how did you get involved with strength and conditioning and just working in the sports industry? Was that something that you always wanted to pursue?
Yeah, so I grew up in Rhode Island, grew up in Lincoln, played high school, obviously, at Lincoln High School, public skid, way to go. When I was in high school, at one point, I was 285 pounds, and I just was not enjoying it anymore. And I got really, really into personal training and exercising and eating right. It was just one of those things where, I enjoyed those things. I enjoyed the results and the process along the way. And my junior year, I was 285. Like I said, my senior year, I lost 70 pounds. It was down to 215 pounds. And I think that made such a huge impact on my life, because if I didn't do that, I don't think I would have played sports after high school. I don't think I would have entered a field like this, exercise science, strength conditioning. Those things kind of helped me and motivated me to keep playing football at the next level. So I ended up going to Springfield College, like you said. Small D3 school in Western Mass. It was the only school that would give, at the time, a 215, 220 pound football player a shot to play offensive line. Typically, our offensive linemen here at URI are 300 plus, 315, got a couple 340 pounders. So I was definitely undersized for the position and the demand, but Springfield plays a different game, and they gave me a shot, an opportunity, and kind of that classic Rhode Island underdog in me, worked my way up into a captain role by my senior year there. And Springfield was a great place to learn. Most of my strength coaches when I was there ended up moving on to better jobs, Division I, Division II. A couple of coaches went to the NFL as well. So I was surrounded by really, really, really good strength and conditioning coaches, and it quickly helped solidify, like, this is what I want to do moving forward. I want to be not a football coach. I'd rather be a strength coach. I'd rather help people improve and get better and make a change in their life. So it was high school, and then college solidified, like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to make a living out of.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of answered this next question in your last answer, but A question that we really love to ask on this podcast is just, what is your why, or what motivates you? What do you look forward to most about being the head strength coach?
Yeah. So to take this back even one step further, when this position opened up for me, it was originally an assistant position. Prior to URI, I was at Merrimack College, which is north of Boston, a small D1 school. I was there for 5 years, kind of running football and a bunch of other sports, basketball, women's track, lacrosse, was doing all that. But deep down, I wanted to be a little bit closer to my family. North of Boston's not that bad, but when URI popped up, I was like, this is it. This is the chance to come back home. And there's not many, strength and conditioning programs in Rhode Island. There's Brown, there's Bryant, there's Rick, but these chances don't come very often. So I applied and got the job here right before the pandemic in 2020, and then we had a couple months off. We didn't get to do as much, but now coming back in last year and this year as well, just really solidified. Like I'm here to help our athletes have the best possible experience ever. Is it important to get stronger over the course of your 4 years? Yes. Is it important to get faster and more powerful? For sure. But if you're here for 4 years and you leave and you're not a better person, or if you leave here and you don't know how to do a lot of these things on your own, by the time you graduate, then I've failed you. I want to make it so that when you leave and you graduate, one, you love strength and conditioning, you love exercising, you love staying fit because you know how important it is, and it's a huge piece of your lifestyle. And then two, you can go out and do these things on your own. And you enjoyed your time here. I never want to be, let me rephrase that. I want this to be one of the best experiences of your entire college career. When people go back and they reflect on, 10 years ago when you were back in college, there's some stories that you tell, and then there's some things that you remember. And, hopefully, being in the weight room, working out, and it's not always fun, right? Sometimes it's strain and effort and a lot of sweat and soreness involved, but hopefully those are good memories for you along the way. And that's our goal here, is to make this place not only a place where you develop and get better and our athletes become successful along the way, but also it's a great time, a great experience, and it's a lasting impact on your life.
Absolutely. And just reflecting on the past year or two with COVID and the pandemic, really, last year's a great example because a lot of the teams weren't training on campus. They weren't in the gyms because of the restrictions and everything that occurred. So what were you guys in your department really doing to kind of still enforce the exercising and the importance of strength and conditioning at home? Because obviously the stay-at-home order was in place. So, a lot of these athletes were not able to do a lot of this in person. They had to do it at home.
Yeah. Not everyone. We had a couple athletes that have their own home gym and they're stocked up with weights and they're like, I'm still going to crank it up. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. But every single athlete, regardless of situation, was provided with exercises to do while they were home. So we created a ton of different body weight exercises, and we found ways to keep making it harder, whether it's, picking up simple objects like a backpack filled with some books, or just holding maybe a lunge, and instead of doing sets of 10, we're going to hold that lunge for 30 seconds straight. We're going to find other ways to challenge it. But none of that works if you don't put in the work. So one important piece for us was just making sure to check in with our athletes throughout that time where they were away from us, to make sure, hey, how's everything going? Are you able to go out and, do your conditioning work out in the street, or can you go out to a field and do some of that stuff? The other part too is we didn't know when we would get back to playing sports. So it's hard to train when you don't know if you're going to end up even playing a sport in the fall. So that was the other thing too, is keeping our athletes motivated and understanding, hey, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. All you can do is get better today. And that's kind of the message we were preaching there, is do what you can to get better today, and you'll thank yourself tomorrow.
Absolutely. It was a stressful time, and you talk about just the intensity within the gym or in general, but I can't imagine just, really everything that you guys had to deal with and kind of think on your feet during all of this pandemic and everything. And of course the athletes as well. I want to get into mental health, but we'll get into that later. I have a couple more questions because I know how important that is to just student athletes in general, But you sort of alluded to this before, coming out of college and then kind of getting into coaching. But what was that transition really like, being an athlete and then going over to be a coach, out of college? What's that transition like?
Yeah. So that the initial transition is probably the hardest, right? Because when I graduated from Springfield, I stayed and got my master's there, and I was lucky enough to get a position where I was their strength coach. So from one year, I went from being the captain of the football team to now being the coach in charge of telling them what to do and how to make sure we're training as properly as we can to get ready for the season. And that's a giant shift in terms of you were just their friends. You were hanging out with them a year ago, and then now you have to be the one that's helping them go on the right path, and the discipline piece that people are kind of straying away from the way and get them back on track. That was the toughest part, is kind of separating yourself of, hey, you can be their friend, but at the end of the day, you're being paid to help them get to where they need to be. And that's not always going to be pretty. So I think that's the toughest transition for anybody. If you're going from strength conditioning or you're going from coaching, that time when you're a GA, a graduate student, and you're kind of learning how to coach and be in charge of a group for the first time on your own. And if you make mistakes, it's on you. So learning that piece and navigating the friend versus coach relationship is tricky. As the older you get, it's that line gets easier and easier every year. There's things where I don't really relate to anymore. I try to stay up to date, try to stay hip with the lingo, but I'm not always there. So I think that helps too. Just naturally over time, you kind of figure yourself out and you figure out, how to talk to the group, how to handle things the right way. I always say I'm not the strictest coach in the world. I've had plenty of those in my day, and it's not always the best style for every athlete. Every athlete's a little bit different. Some people like to be yelled at and coached hard. Other people, you got to work with them one-on-one and correct them and love them up. So it's understanding every single player and their wants and needs, and then how do you best meet them in order to get success. So it comes a time. You just got to keep plugging away at it. If you make mistakes, learn from it and try and get better.
Absolutely. And sticking with that, really, I noticed that you interned with the departments over at Missouri and Brown before becoming the graduate assistant at Merrimack and kind of getting that role there. Just walk me through what those experiences taught you, what they were like for you.
Yeah. So my first internship I ever did in strength and conditioning was at Brown University with Coach O'Neill. He's still there. He's a phenomenal coach. I'm saying I think Rhode Island between Coach O'Neill, Coach Buckley over at Bryant, two phenomenal coaches in Rhode Island. I think we're kind of spoiled, small state with some great coaches in it. But he gave me my first internship, and I had a lot of responsibility from the jump. And I go back and think about it now, and I feel like I was a terrible intern, but that's how it goes. You got to learn the hard way. And he did a great job of just throwing me into the fire. And if I hadn't done that internship, I don't know if I would have had as much confidence moving forward. But that was just, hey, you're in. We have so many Ivy League teams. We're here in the summer, cranking from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Let's get after it and get your feet wet. So that was my first internship. And then I realized from there, with strength and conditioning, there's a couple different avenues right now. There's, kind of the Power 5 FBS football. There's kind of everyone in between. Basketball in recent years has shifted into a sport where you might be a basketball strength coach and that's it. I see it a little bit nowadays with baseball and some other sports as well. But I was like, let's see if I want to do a big time football internship, be a Power 5 football strength coach. I went out to the University of Missouri. And that was the year they ended up in the SEC title game. I forget. I think it was like 2013. I'm getting old now. I'm forgetting these things. But to see how the highest level does it in terms of organization and structure, and if you want to be as successful as they were, it comes down to taking care of every single detail on every single basis. I remember our manual for the summer was like 600 pages long of who is going to fill up the vending machine if it ever runs out. If 3 people call in sick, what do we do? And it seems like overkill, but when you're that prepared, you're going to end up being successful as long as you handle all your business. So I realized it was a great experience, but that's not something I wanted to go and chase and continue to do. And luckily enough, I kind of landed in that sweet spot in the middle. Even Merrimack College is in the Northeast Conference, NEC. So it's kind of a lower level Division I FCS, but it's still very competitive football. It's still very competitive sports. The Atlantic 10 for track and field and tennis, the other teams I work with, is super competitive. So it's an opportunity to work with great athletes with maybe a little less pressure to succeed. And you're not always on, ESPN top 10 every day. So that was one thing that I enjoy about this level more than anything else is, hey, you know what, if you make a mistake, it's going to be okay. Whereas some of those higher levels, the Power Five, the big time football programs, if you make one mistake, you're out. So, um, it's good. I'm not shutting the door on that ever, but I like where I'm at. I love this level. I love the kids that we work with here. It's a great level and a great trying to build something here. So.
Absolutely. And I think what you mentioned before about just like building a culture really, because again, like there's a lot more that just goes into just picking a bunch of weights and lifting, but really just building a culture and what you talked about earlier about just having kids reflect back on college and think about, the times that they've had and maybe not share them as stories, but they can reflect on, maybe the experiences that they've had during strength and conditioning. So your job is so important, so crucial. And now you're here at URI doing it for football, women's tennis, and women's track, as you mentioned earlier, really overseeing all the strength and conditioning. So what is really the best part about your job? And then to flip that question, what is the most challenging part of your job?
One of the best parts of the job, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention them, are the two assistants I brought in. Mark Zabicki is my first assistant. He is a Cumberland guy, so he's another Rhode Islander on staff. You gotta love that. He spent 5 years up at Stonehill College, just over the border there, and he was a head strength coach there. And we had an opportunity to bring him in and give him a little bit better quality of life. And our athletes have loved everything that Mark has done. He's a great attention to detail, and then on the floor, he's tenacious. I like to say he's a tenacious coach out there. He'll make sure everything's right. Then our other assistant coach, Sam Greenfield, is a Providence guy. So again, bringing another Rhode Islander who understands kind of what we're trying to do here. And, we all have that little bit of a chip on our shoulder, want to see this place succeed and be a place that people want to come do internships to, be a place people want to come, when they see their recruiting tours, they're like, wow, that's the best weight room we've been in. It looks like it's the most fun weight room. It looks like they get great results and they get after it. So if I had to say the best part of the job is probably, and I'm not going to, we have one more strength coach, Dan Apodaca, who just got here. He's our men's and women's basketball guy. No knock to him, but he's not a New Englander. So we got to give him -point for that. But hopefully we can convert him. Give him a couple of clam cakes and chowder. We'll see if we can convert him into a New Englander. But going to work with those guys every day makes my job a lot easier. So I don't have to stress and worry about, our other teams getting taken care of. Does our swim program have a great strength coach in place? Are they getting stronger? Are they getting better? I can go to bed at night and know that, all of our teams are getting great training. They're getting a great experience here. There's no teams that feel like they're underappreciated or anything like that. And when you have guys like that in your corner, it makes everything a lot easier. You get the right people on the bus is going to go in the right direction. So the most challenging piece of the job is we're always trying to do more. And, sometimes there's not enough hours in the day. There's not enough resources to get some of those things done. Would I love to be at every single team's practice every single day? Yes, I would love to. It's not something I can realistically do. I got to be, if I'm out at practice, then I can't be in the weight room coaching the team. So it's one of those things where over time, I think if we get a couple more strength coaches, we get a little bit more resources to provide better training for our athletes. I think we can keep taking things to another level. And that's the exciting piece too. It's like, yeah, that's a challenge right now, but it's also a limitless opportunity to keep this program building and building and building for years to come.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it just sounds like being able to do so much into one day is just like, and work with all these teams just to, get the best of what you're trying to get out of those teams. Fortunately you have great coaches around you, as you mentioned. But really transitioning into my next question is, just walk me through what a typical day looks like for you. I'm sure there really is no typical day because it's just so crazy between all the different sports that go on here at URI. But, generally, what does it look like from start to finish? I can imagine it'd be very stressful. But what do you really do throughout the day to, help or, be beneficial to these teams?
So we'll start a typical day. Some people will open the door. They'll have teams at 5:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning. We're lucky enough. Our earliest team is 6:30. Over time, I want to try and push that later and later. I think sleep is so important. But actually, the first people to open the day are our school president and our athletic director. They come in and work out 3 times a week. They're the first people in here pushing sleds, moving weights. So you love to see that. You love to see an athletic director and a school president that are in here getting after it, that enjoy this place too. So sometimes you walk in and they're already sweating, getting after it. So that's good to see. We typically, we lift based around a lot of teams' practice schedules. So, and that is based around their class schedule. So most people don't have class before 8 or 9 a.m. So we'll see a lot of teams try and lift early in the morning. So we'll have like a 6:30. We might have a 7 o'clock team come in, 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock. So it depends on which day, who's in when. There's some days where I might have a team at 7. Somebody else might have a team at 7. It all depends on the day. And then some of our teams like to practice in the morning. For example, our football program typically practices anytime between 8 and 11. So I'll go out there to practice. I'll warm them up. If anyone is not practicing that day and they are on a return to play protocol, we're rehabbing a hamstring injury, we're not allowed to hit people or do contact because of a shoulder injury, things like that. That'll be my time to get some extra speed, agility, quickness, or conditioning, or strengthening exercises in at practice. It's also good for me to be there to see what we're doing at practice. And if I need to make any changes to our training program later, I can do those things as well. So keeping an eye on how practice is going. I might pop in or not back into the weight room to see if we have any people that are inside doing their rehab. Our athletic training room is right down the hall. So a lot of our athletes will do their rehab in the training room, and then they might come in to do something in the weight room as well. We might have other teams in, and then throughout the day we'll have other groups as well. So post football practice, there will be, for me, a football group that comes in. Typically, if there's any staff meetings or things like that, that'll happen around lunchtime, the middle of the day as well, because more often than not, people are in class around 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. And then afternoon is, again, when it picks up. So if teams are either practicing or they're coming into the weight room in the afternoon, we typically see a lot of teams between 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock. I do the best I can. One thing I hate to see, and our assistant Mark, when he was the head guy at Stonehill, he had to do this where somebody has to open up at 6 o'clock and then they have to close at 6 o'clock at night. So we do the best we can with our schedule to avoid that, to make sure that our coaches have a chance to go home too, because people forget that. They think, you were there at football practice and then you were done for the day. And it's like, no, I still have other teams and I'm here till 5 o'clock at night. I got to make sure I'm getting home and seeing my family too. So having a little bit of balance is key. So today it will be a little bit later day for me. Track and field's going to come in. We're going to crank it up at 4 o'clock today, but every day is a little bit different. And then on the weekends, it just depends if we have teams in training or if we have a game that we're going to go support our athletes at, or do a pregame warm up or things like that. So every day is a little bit different for sure, but that's kind of the gist of what our days look like.
Yeah, and I can imagine how stressful it can be for a student athlete, just with practices, with training, with just games in general, meetings, everything that really goes into it. It can be stressful. I think a lot of people put a lot of pressure on these student athletes. They forget that they're just people. I'm just a student. A lot of these people are in my classes, but I think a lot of people, fans, members of the media, they just forget that there's a lot that goes into it. A typical day for an athlete, just as much as a coach, is a lot that goes into it. So something I know you wanted to talk about when we spoke over the phone was how important mental health is in an athlete. So just what has the department done? I know there's a lot going on with No Shave November, but what has the department done, and what are they hoping to accomplish with all of this and just mental health in general? Do you want to just talk about that?
Yeah. So we sat down as staff, and in the past, Mark and I used to work together. So in the past, we've done the Movember, the mustache, right? And you grow the mustache out, and we decided, because November is Men's Health Month, and we said, all right, what fundraiser, what group do we want to work with? And we've had a lot of success with the Movember Fund, and they typically support either testicular cancer or prostate cancer. But in the past 5 or 6 years, they've also added mental health and suicide prevention. So we kind of thought, all right, which one relates most with our student athletes? Which one can they connect with, and which one can we educate them on and give them some good resources towards? And not to say that the other two are important. I think they're extremely important to raise some money and help the fight against prostate cancer and testicular cancer. But I think mental health and suicide prevention is huge, not only for our entire student athletes to relate and connect to, but in particular our male student athletes, because I think it's a stigma to talk about your mental health. And if kind of the meathead, the weight room, the physical, if we're willing to open up and talk about our mental health and things that we struggle with, and understand that it's okay to share those emotions and share those feelings and talk about those things. I think if we can be the outlet for that, it's a sign that, it's something that everybody needs to talk about. So we did join up with the Movember Fund. We've started a fundraiser where you can contribute directly to our strength and conditioning team. We've had athletes and some other people sign up as well. So they wanted to sign up, join our team, and then go out and collect fundraising money from other people. I wish I had the trophy in front of me right now. I don't have it now, but the one person on our team that ends up collecting the most donations will get a nice mustache trophy. So we went out and found a mustache trophy. But so far, we're a little over a weekend at this point, and we've already raised close to $1,500, which is much more than I ever thought was going to be possible. I think the first 2 days we had over 600. So phenomenal. And throughout we still have 21 days here. So we're going to continue to share facts and information on our Instagram, which is Rhody Strength. And then we'll also, throughout our other channels, I'll share it on my own page. I'll share it on Facebook and things like that. And we talk to our athletes about some of these topics as well. How to fight the stigma of mental health and make it okay to be something to talk about, and just share that you're not alone in terms of struggling with mental health. I think I put up an infographic today that over 6 million men struggle with mental health illness of some kind per year. So you're not alone in that. And then just know that there's plenty of people to talk to about it. You don't need to what males typically do is like hold those things in and collect those and be a tough guy, or just man up, and just know that it is okay to talk about those things, and find that person that you trust and the person that can relate and talk it out with them. So we're continuing to raise money, and we're also continuing to kind of share knowledge and educate, and hopefully make more of a difference than just picking up weights and putting them down.
Absolutely. That's incredible that we're recording this on November 8th, and you guys have already raised $1,500 for a great cause. I mean, first of all, I think everybody has or knows somebody that struggles with mental health. It's becoming more and more, especially with the pandemic. That brought down a lot of people's mental health. So
yeah, for sure.
Just the last couple of years, it's so important that you highlight that. And as a coach, as an educator, the fact that you guys as a department are realizing the significance of that, and not being afraid to really talk about it, that's so important, especially with mental health. Like you said, I think a lot of people just bottle up their feelings, especially men. I guess it's more common. And they're not as willing to talk about how they feel. And like I was alluding to before, a lot of athletes, especially student athletes, I've talked to a lot of them. I've talked to a lot of other coaches about mental health, and just how important it is just to acknowledge it and to do something about it, and to feel that it's okay to talk about it. Because again, like there's so much pressure that these student athletes go through. So I can't imagine like what they do. I give them a lot of credit, honestly. So for you guys as a department, as coaches, to acknowledge that, address it, and really be there for support, really, and help them, that's incredible. And the fact that you guys are raising as much money as you did and awareness is incredible. So I give you guys credit for that as well. So
yeah, I think people have no idea how hard it is to student athletes, especially at the highest level. For some of our teams that practice in the morning, they might be in the building at 5:30 in the morning to get their ankles taped, to get treatment before sitting in a meeting for an hour and a half to watch film, to then go to practice for an hour and a half, 2 hours, to then go work out for another 35, 45 minutes after that, then to shower, just to go to class for a couple more hours.
Yeah.
Come back in the afternoon for a second treatment, for a second film session, for whatever else may be. And then, on top of that, the pressure to be successful, the pressure to do well in school. You're away from your family. You don't get to see your friends as much as a normal student would, because you have to go on the road and travel and do everything else. So, our athletes are going through it, and it's okay. And if, anyone ever needs somebody to talk to about it, my door, other than for this Zoom interview, the rest of the time, my door is always open. So
for sure. And I think another thing that you sort of just mentioned before we move on, that they're away from their families. Like, again, I give these guys a lot of credit because of the pressure that they go through. Just kind of having the stereotype that they're, on scholarship and that they can't mess up. They need to be successful athletes. They need to take care of their strength and conditioning. And then inside the classroom, they need to succeed. But just the fact that they're away from their families, especially with the holiday season coming up, with Thanksgiving, with, Christmas, Hanukkah, all of that, like, I can't imagine some of these teams, some of these athletes, really committing to it. I give them a lot of credit. With men's and women's basketball starting up, a lot of them are going to have to be away from their families because they'll be playing in non-conference tournaments, stuff like that. So I give them a lot of credit for that. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah.
But just two more questions that I have for you. What are things that you wish you didn't know, or you wish that you did know now that you didn't know before when you started your career as a strength and conditioning coach?
Oh, that's a good question. What did I wish I knew? To be honest with you, I wish I knew more about finances as an adult. One of those things, they don't teach you enough of that in school. How to handle when you do finally get those paychecks. Like, I understand you gotta pay your rent, you gotta pay your bills, you gotta make sure you get some food. You got student loan payments to take care of, and then what do you do with the rest? And that was one thing early on in my career. I had to work my way up into a job that could financially take care of myself. So there were some months where, I was like, savings, I don't know anything about that because I don't have time to save. So understanding how to financially handle yourself better, I think it doesn't matter what career you end up in. I think that's something that people don't talk about enough of. All right, when you do get a job, look at the benefits package. What's in that? What does that mean? What can you do? That's extra money on the table. So, how can you take advantage of this as best as possible? What kind of savings accounts do you set up? How do you handle those things going forward? Yeah, I think if I had to pick one thing that I didn't know enough about early on, I wish I was better about, it would probably be the financial side of things, how to be an adult.
Yeah, I'm still in college, but I'm trying to learn that myself. It's not easy, budgeting, and paying for tuition, stuff like that. So, and then eventually I'm a junior now, but eventually graduating and then going on to get a job and then support myself and my family. Yeah, that's something that
Yeah.
scary to think about now at 20 years old, but it's real life stuff. So, but yeah, no, the last question I have for you is, what advice do you have for athletes or even those just looking to work in sports?
Yeah. So my biggest piece of advice is just taking it one day at a time, trying to be better than you were the day before. I think too often we set these lofty goals for ourselves. I want to bench press 500 pounds. I want to squat 600 pounds. I want to be the most explosive person ever. Like, those things are all fine and dandy. That's great. It's important to have a vision of who you want to be. But at the end of the day, it's what you do on a daily basis that will separate you from the person you are now. So it's not the one big workout that knocks you out for 3 days because you can't even walk up the stairs. It's doing the little things you're supposed to do on a daily basis that add up over time. If you keep doing good things will happen to you. But I tell people to avoid the diets where you crash for 4 weeks hard and then you lose 20 pounds. Like, just eat better every day. Consistently train. If you train 3-4 days a week consistent for 52 weeks over the 4 years you're here, right? That's over 200 weeks. That's 2 workouts, 3 workouts a week. That's halfway to 1,000 workouts. If you add all the warm-ups we do before practice and you do the little things right during every single warm-up, the hours and the minutes, they all add up. And I always say, I want you to leave here and not even be able to recognize the person that you were when you walked in. And the only way you do that is through stacking up good days on top of good days on top of good days, over and over and over and over. So don't keep thinking. It's important to have those lofty goals, the big things you want to do, but then just put your head down every single day and get one step closer to them.
Absolutely, it's great words of advice and wisdom, really. Before we wrap up, I should mention that really just I'm a type 1 diabetic myself, so wasn't really always prior to my diagnosis wasn't really quite an athlete, which is why I'm trying to get into sports media. But really just like what that has taught me about training and just like learning how to, you know, take on this new lifestyle. It's so important. So just like everything that you brought up, about just health and strength and conditioning and everything in general, it's so important because a lot of that I've even learned myself in the last couple of years, just with everything that I've had to do, keeping a consistent diet, stuff like that. So Scott, thank you so much for joining me today, connecting with me. I really hope to stay in touch. I'm always down there in the athletic facilities, most of the time just trying to get credentials to go to games and stuff like that in Mackle. But if I'm ever by the gyms or by the offices, I'll make sure to stop in and say hi. I appreciate it again for joining me. And of course, go Rhody.
Yeah, go Rhody, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
The price I want for a show, you gon' need 3 promoters. I got the body from Jim Ellis, but I had switched the motor. I got these badass bitch riding around this bitch, they all the coders. I just told her make a story. I just bought all the Trojans. I told her style